July 12, 1943. 4:17 a.m. Prokhorovka, Soviet Union. SS-Obersturmbannführer Michael Wittmann pressed his face against the Tiger's commander optics, his breath fogging the glass in the pre-dawn chill. What he saw through the Zeiss lenses made his heart hammer against his ribs, not with fear, but with the electric anticipation of a predator who has just realized the prey outnumbers him 50-1. Across the rolling steppes of Prokhorovka, the horizon was moving. Not with the morning wind, but with steel. Hundreds upon hundreds of T-34 tanks, their squat silhouettes emerging from the grain fields like a swarm of mechanical insects, their 76mm guns glinting in the first light of dawn. Behind them, thousands more. The largest tank battle in human history was about to begin, and Michael Wittmann, Germany's greatest tank ace with 119 confirmed kills, was positioned directly in its path. The Soviet assault force comprised 850 tanks from the 5th Guards Tank Army, supported by 500 additional tanks from reserve formations, totaling approximately 1,350 armored vehicles concentrated on a front barely 10 kilometers wide. Against them stood 294 German tanks and assault guns, including only 15 Tiger is, the most feared tank in the world. Wittmann's Tiger 007 was one of those 15. At 4:30 a.m., the command came through his headset. All Tigers, prepare for engagement. Hold your fire until 800 meters. Make every shot count. Wittmann's crew, gunner Balthasar Wall, loader Karl Wagner, driver Heinrich Reimers, radio operator Werner Ergang, had been together for 8 months. They moved with mechanical precision born of survival instinct. The Tiger's 88mm KWK-36 gun could penetrate any Soviet tank at 1,500 meters. The T-34's gun could penetrate a Tiger's frontal armor at approximately 500 meters if they were extraordinarily lucky. But statistics meant nothing when you were outnumbered 4-1. What Wittmann witnessed through his optics that morning contradicted everything German intelligence had assured him about Soviet industrial capacity after 2 years of devastating losses. In 1941, German panzers had destroyed over 20,000 Soviet tanks. The Soviets should have been crippled, their factories captured or destroyed, their tank parks empty. Yet here, rolling toward him in seemingly endless waves, was physical proof that every assumption was catastrophically wrong. Soviet production had not collapsed. It had accelerated. The T-34s kept coming, appearing from behind every hill, emerging from every tree line, a steel tide that seemed to have no end. For Michael Wittmann, one of the most decorated tank commanders in German history, this moment marked the beginning of a terrible education in mathematics. He was about to learn that skill, experience, and superior technology become irrelevant when facing industrial might on a scale his nation could never match. The transformation had begun. Within hours, German tank commanders across the Kursk salient would witness a demonstration of Soviet industrial resurrection that would shatter every assumption about their enemy's capacity to absorb losses and regenerate combat power. What they saw rolling toward them that July morning was not just an army. It was proof that the Soviet Union had mastered industrial warfare while Germany remained trapped in the paradigms of skilled craftsmanship and tactical brilliance. The mathematics of defeat were measured not in kill ratios, but in production capacity. And Michael Wittmann was about to receive his first lesson in a course that would end with his death 13 months later, destroyed by a Sherman tank he never saw coming. The night of July 11 had brought ominous intelligence reports to 2 SS Panzer Corps headquarters. Lieutenant General Pavel Rotmistrov's 5th Guards Tank Army had been detected moving into assembly areas around Prokhorovka. Aerial reconnaissance reported columns stretching back 40 kilometers. SS-Obergruppenführer Paul Hauser, commanding the Panzer Corps, studied the reports with growing unease. A veteran of World War I and a career soldier, Hauser understood logistics. The number of tanks being reported seemed impossible. Germany's entire tank production for 1943 would total approximately 5,966 panzers. The Soviets were committing what appeared to be a quarter of Germany's annual production to a single battle. How could they afford such concentration after the losses of 1941 and 1942? General der Panzertruppe Hermann Hoth, commanding 4th Panzer Army, had pressed the attack despite the intelligence. Operation Citadel, Hitler's grand offensive to pinch off the Kursk salient, was already behind schedule. The Führer had delayed the operation from May to July, waiting for new Panther tanks that arrived with mechanical defects and untrained crews. Now, with the offensive stalled after only a week, Hoth needed a breakthrough. Prokhorovka was the key terrain. Capture it, and the road to Kursk lay open. Fail, and Citadel would collapse. What neither Hauser nor Hoth fully grasped was that they were facing not just another Soviet counterattack, but a fundamental shift in how modern war would be waged. The Soviets were not trying to outfight the Germans. They were trying to outproduce them, to drown German tactical superiority under waves of adequate equipment deployed in overwhelming numbers. SS-Obersturmbannführer Franz Staudager, commanding another Tiger in Wittmann's company, peered through his periscope at 4:45 a.m. as the Soviet tanks began their advance. Born in 1923, Staudager was younger than Wittmann but equally skilled. He would end this day with 22 tank kills, destroying more enemy armor in a single engagement than most tank commanders achieved in their entire careers. Yet even as he prepared to fire, Staudager felt something he had never experienced before in combat, not fear, but mathematical certainty of eventual defeat. "There are too many," he said over the company radio net. "Far too many." Wittmann's response was characteristically direct. "Then we kill as many as we can." Tiger 007, engaging. At 5 a.m., as the rising sun broke across the steppes, the Soviet tanks opened fire. The distinctive crack of hundreds of 76mm guns split the morning air. Most rounds fell short or ricocheted off the Tiger's frontal armor. The Germans held their fire. At 800 meters, Wittmann gave the order his crew had been waiting for. Target, tank, 800 meters, armor-piercing. Balthasar Wall, the gunner, already had the T-34 centered in his optics. Identified. Fire. The Tiger rocked backward as the 88mm gun fired. The armor-piercing shell crossed 800 meters in less than 2 seconds. The T-34 erupted in flames, its turret spinning off in a lazy arc. Before the turret hit the ground, Wall had already acquired the next target. Tank, 750 meters. Fire. Another T-34 exploded. Then another. Then another. The German Tigers opened fire with methodical precision. Each shot was aimed, deliberate, almost surgical. The Soviet T-34s charged forward, firing on the move, their shots wildly inaccurate but their advance relentless. The tactical mathematics initially favored the Germans. 15 Tigers engaging 850 Soviet tanks might seem suicidal, but the Tigers held superior positions on reverse slope positions, their thick armor and powerful guns creating a kill zone no T-34 could safely cross. In the first 20 minutes, Wittmann's company destroyed 43 Soviet tanks. Staudager alone accounted for 8. The burning hulks created obstacles that channeled subsequent waves into even more favorable engagement zones. For a brief moment, it seemed German tactical superiority might prevail despite impossible odds. Then the Soviet tanks adapted. Rather than approaching across open ground where German gunners could engage at leisure, T-34 commanders began using the terrain, using smoke, using the cover of burning vehicles to close range. Several Soviet tanks, accepting catastrophic losses, charged directly at German positions. At 400 meters, even a T-34's gun could penetrate a Tiger's side armor. At 200 meters, lucky shots could find vision blocks, gun mantlets, engine grills. What Michael Wittmann witnessed in that moment was the essence of Soviet tactical doctrine. The Soviets were not trying to outshoot German tanks. They were trying to overwhelm them through sheer numbers, accepting horrific losses to close range where their inferior guns could achieve kills. It was brutal. It was costly. It was mathematically sound. At 6:30 a.m., Wittmann's Tiger had destroyed its 14th T-34 of the morning when a Soviet tank he hadn't seen fired from 300 meters. The round penetrated the Tiger's right track, immobilizing the vehicle. Reimers, the driver, fought the controls as the Tiger slewed sideways. Track destroyed. We're immobilized. Wittmann assessed instantly. An immobile tank was a dead tank. Reverse on left track. Get us behind that berm. The Tiger lurched backward, its remaining track churning, pulling them behind a low rise that provided defilade from Soviet fire. Wagner, the loader, was already grabbing spare ammunition. They had fired 38 rounds. Only 54 remained. The Tiger carried 92 rounds of main gun ammunition. At their current rate of fire, they would run dry in 90 minutes. As Wittmann's crew worked frantically to repair the track under fire, he radioed company headquarters. Tiger 007 immobilized, continuing to engage from static position. Ammunition state 54 rounds. The response carried an edge of desperation. All Tigers, be advised, Soviet reinforcements continue arriving. Count now exceeds 1,000 enemy tanks. 1,000 tanks. The number seemed impossible, insane, divorced from any rational military calculation. Germany's entire Eastern Front tank strength was approximately 2,400 panzers stretched across 1,600 miles. The Soviets had concentrated 1,000 tanks on a front 10 kilometers wide. This was not a battle. It was industrial warfare, the massing of material on a scale German doctrine had never contemplated because German industry could never achieve it. Throughout the morning of July 12, German tank commanders across the Prokhorovka battlefield experienced the same shocking realization. Lieutenant Ribbentrop, commanding a Panzer IV in the Leibstandard division, watched Soviet tanks advance through fields his company had just cleared. We destroyed 20 of them. Where are these new ones coming from? The answer, though none of the Germans knew it yet, was simple. The Soviets were producing 2,000 tanks per month. Germany was producing approximately 500. For every Panzer Germany built, the Soviet Union built 4 tanks. For every Tiger Germany painstakingly handcrafted, each one requiring 300,000 man-hours and 6 months of production time, the Soviets were stamping out T-34s in weeks using mass production techniques copied from American automobile factories. The variety of Soviet armor also stunned German observers. T-34/76 tanks formed the bulk of the assault, but interspersed among them were heavier KV-1s, nearly immune to anything except German 88mm guns or close-range shots. T-70 light tanks, obsolete and vulnerable, were thrown forward as reconnaissance by fire, drawing German fire and revealing positions. Lend-Lease Sherman tanks provided by America added to the variety. By midday, German tankers reported engaging enemy armor they couldn't immediately identify because the Soviets fielded so many different types. This diversity reflected not careful planning but industrial abundance. The Soviets could afford to deploy older models alongside new ones because their factories produced more than enough to equip frontline units while maintaining reserve formations. Michael Wittmann's crew completed field repairs on their track at 8:15 a.m. They had been stationary for 105 minutes, firing from defilade, and had destroyed 9 additional Soviet tanks. Ammunition state, 29 rounds. Fuel state, 1/3. Engine overheating from sustained operation in summer heat without movement to provide cooling airflow. Wittmann faced a tactical decision that encapsulated the German dilemma. Fall back to resupply and rearm, abandoning their defensive position, or hold and potentially run dry of ammunition. Before he could decide, a Soviet artillery barrage began walking across their position. Katyusha rockets, Stalin's organs, shrieked overhead, their distinctive sound triggering instant nausea. Each Katyusha launcher carried 16 to 48 rockets. A typical Soviet rocket artillery battalion could deliver 3,840 kilograms of explosives in a single salvo. The Germans had nothing comparable. Wittmann ordered retreat. As Tiger 007 withdrew through pre-planned fallback routes, Wittmann witnessed the battlefield panorama. Dozens of Tigers and Panthers, hundreds of Panzer IVs and assault guns, all reversing, firing, displacing, the classic German defensive doctrine executed with practiced skill. And rolling toward them, seemingly inexhaustible, came Soviet tanks. For every 10 T-34s destroyed, 15 more appeared. The exchange ratio favored Germans tactically, they were killing 3 to 5 Soviet tanks for every German loss, but favored Soviets strategically. Germany could not replace losses quickly. The Soviets could. The mathematics were brutal and undeniable. By 2 p.m., Michael Wittmann's Tiger had expended all ammunition. He had personally accounted for 28 confirmed Soviet tank kills in 9 hours of combat, one of the highest single-day tallies of the war. Franz Staudager would claim 22 kills, earning him the Knight's Cross. Across the Prokhorovka battlefield, German tankers had fought with extraordinary skill and courage, destroying approximately 400 to 500 Soviet tanks. It was one of the most lopsided tactical victories in armored warfare history. And it was completely, utterly irrelevant. The Soviets still held Prokhorovka. Soviet reserves continued flowing forward. Operation Citadel had failed. 3 days later, Hitler would cancel the offensive entirely and transfer units to Italy to respond to Allied landings in Sicily. What German commanders gradually realized in the days following Prokhorovka was that they had not fought a battle. They had fought an industrial equation. Soviet losses at Prokhorovka, approximately 400 to 500 tanks destroyed, represented about 12 days of Soviet tank production. German losses at Prokhorovka, approximately 80 to 100 tanks, represented 1 month of German production. The Soviets could absorb Prokhorovka-scale losses every week and still grow stronger. Germany could not. The 1943 production statistics, compiled after the war, starkly illustrated the industrial disparity. Soviet tank production 1943, approximately 24,000 tanks. German tank production 1943, approximately 5,966 panzers. The Soviets built 4 tanks for every 1 Germany produced. And this didn't account for British production of 7,476 tanks or American production of 29,497 tanks in 1943. Germany faced enemies who collectively outproduced them 15 to 1 in armor alone. The Tiger tank perfectly illustrated Germany's strategic failure. The Tiger I was probably the best heavy tank in the world in 1943. Its 88mm gun could destroy any Allied tank at ranges they could not return fire. Its armor was nearly impenetrable frontally. A single Tiger commanded respect on any battlefield. But Tigers were expensive, complex, and time-consuming to produce. Germany would manufacture only 1,347 Tigers total during the entire war. The Soviet Union produced 58,000 T-34 tanks. America produced 49,234 Sherman tanks. Britain produced 25,000 Cromwell and Churchill tanks. For every Tiger, the Allies collectively produced approximately 100 medium tanks. German tactical excellence was being buried under industrial mathematics. Michael Wittmann survived Prokhorovka and continued his career as Germany's most successful tank ace. His final tally would reach 138 confirmed tank kills plus 132 anti-tank guns. He became a propaganda symbol, the face of Panzer invincibility. He received the Knight's Cross with oak leaves, was promoted, given command of a company, then a platoon of new King Tiger tanks, even more powerful than the Tiger I. None of it mattered. On August 8, 1944, near Caen, France, Michael Wittmann's Tiger was destroyed by a Sherman tank or British anti-tank gun. He died instantly along with his entire crew. The exact circumstances remain disputed because no fewer than 4 Allied units claimed his kill, so many Allied tanks were in the area that multiple units could credibly claim to have destroyed him. This itself illustrated the point. In 1943, a single Tiger dominated battlefields. By 1944, Tigers were swamped by Allied numbers so great that their destruction became routine, unremarkable. The German officers who survived Kursk carried lessons that transformed their understanding of warfare. General Heinz Guderian, Inspector General of Panzer Troops, wrote in his memoirs, Panzer Leader, the failure of Operation Citadel represented the last German strategic offensive in the East. From this point forward, we were reacting to Soviet initiatives, trading space for time, conducting a fighting withdrawal that could have only one end. We had lost the war of production, and thus the war itself. General Friedrich von Mellenthin, who served as a staff officer at Kursk, later wrote, after Kursk, I realized we were not fighting the Red Army. We were fighting Soviet factories. Every tank we destroyed was replaced by two. Every gun we knocked out reappeared in triplicate. We counted our kills. They counted their production output. The Tiger commanders who fought at Prokhorovka understood the futility before their superiors did. SS-Obersturmbannführer Franz Staudager, despite his Knight's Cross and 22 kills in a day, reportedly told fellow officers after the battle, I killed 22 today. How many did the Soviets build today? 50. 100. We are drowning in their tanks. This was not defeatism. It was mathematical realism. Ernst Barkmann, another Tiger ace who survived the war with 82 kills, said in a post-war interview, every time I destroyed a T-34, I knew another was rolling off a factory line somewhere beyond the Urals. There was no end to them. But every Tiger destroyed was irreplaceable. We were fighting arithmetic with courage. Courage lost. The industrial statistics from 1943 revealed the completeness of Germany's strategic failure. Soviet Union 1943, tanks 24,000, aircraft 35,000, artillery pieces 130,000, military trucks 84,000. Germany 1943, tanks 5,966, aircraft 25,527, artillery pieces 73,000, military trucks 89,151. This comparison didn't include American or British production. Total Allied tank production 1943, approximately 60,976. Germany, 5,966. Allied aircraft production 1943, approximately 122,000. Germany, 25,527. The mathematics were not unfavorable. They were absurd. Germany was attempting to fight the industrial output of three global powers with the production capacity of a single medium-sized European nation increasingly disrupted by strategic bombing. The specific production comparison for the T-34 versus German medium tanks illustrated the gap. From 1940 to 1945, the Soviet Union produced 84,070 tanks and self-propelled guns. Of these, approximately 57,350 were T-34 variants. Germany produced approximately 49,777 total armored fighting vehicles during the entire war, including every tank, assault gun, and tank destroyer variant. The Soviets built more of a single tank model than Germany built of all types combined. This production advantage stemmed from Soviet industrialization programs of the 1930s, the evacuation of factories east beyond German reach in 1941, American Lend-Lease providing trucks and raw materials that freed Soviet production for weapons, and the adoption of mass production techniques that prioritized quantity over perfection. The T-34 itself embodied the Soviet approach to industrial warfare. It was not the best tank in any specific category. German tanks had better optics, better radios, better crew ergonomics, better gun stabilization. But the T-34 was good enough in all categories, simple enough to be produced by semi-skilled workers, rugged enough to operate with minimal maintenance, and cheap enough to be built in the tens of thousands. Its sloped armor was revolutionary but simple to manufacture. Its 76 mm gun was adequate. Its Christie suspension was reliable. Most importantly, it could be produced quickly. A T-34 required approximately 3,000 man-hours to build. A Tiger required 300,000 man-hours. For every Tiger built, the Soviets could produce 100 T-34s. The tactical superiority of the Tiger was irrelevant when facing 100-to-1 numerical odds. The German response to this industrial disadvantage was to double down on quality over quantity. After Kursk, Germany introduced increasingly powerful tanks. The Panther, intended as a medium tank, weighed 45 tons and mounted a 75 mm gun superior to anything the Allies fielded. The Tiger II or King Tiger weighed 70 tons and was nearly invulnerable frontally. The Jag Tiger tank destroyer mounted a 128 mm gun that could destroy any Allied tank at ranges exceeding 3,000 meters. Each was a masterpiece of engineering. Each was also a strategic failure. The King Tiger required 40,000 man-hours to build versus 10,000 for a Panther or 5,000 for a late-model Panzer IV. Germany produced 492 King Tigers. The Soviets produced 29,000 T-34 divided by 85s, the improved 1944 version. America produced 49,234 Shermans. The more capable German tanks became, the more resources they consumed, and the fewer could be built. Beyond tank production, the logistical disparity doomed German forces. The Wehrmacht remained dependent on horses for logistics. In 1943, the German army employed approximately 2,700,000 horses and only 500,000 trucks. The Soviets, by contrast, received 427,000 trucks from America through Lend-Lease, plus their own production of 84,000 trucks in 1943. American trucks enabled Soviet tank armies to operate with unprecedented operational mobility, conducting encirclements and exploitations that German tactical victories could not prevent. The most capable Panzer Division became irrelevant when Soviet mechanized corps simply bypassed strong points and drove into the German rear, supplied by fleets of Studebaker trucks that German forces could not match. The psychological impact on German tank crews was profound. Wittmann and his fellow aces remained confident in individual engagements. Put a Tiger against any Allied tank in a fair fight, and the Tiger won. But there were no fair fights. Tigers were ambushed by multiple Shermans attacking simultaneously from different angles. They were destroyed by ground attack aircraft before they reached battle. They were immobilized by mechanical failures and abandoned for lack of recovery vehicles. They ran out of fuel because supply trucks were destroyed by partisan attacks. They were knocked out by Soviet anti-tank guns that outnumbered German tanks. The tactical superiority of German armor became a bitter joke. As one German tanker wrote in his diary, "We have the best tanks in the world. The enemy has all the tanks in the world." The final statistics from the Battle of Kursk told the story of industrial warfare's triumph over tactical excellence. German losses at Kursk, approximately 760 tanks and assault guns destroyed or damaged beyond field repair, representing nearly 5 months of German production. Soviet losses at Kursk, approximately 6,000 tanks destroyed or damaged, representing 3 months of Soviet production. The Soviets could absorb their losses and attack again within weeks. Germany could not. After Kursk, Germany never again launched a major strategic offensive in the east. The initiative passed permanently to the Soviet Union, which would conduct 10 major offensive operations over the next 22 months, each one smashing through German defenses that lacked the reserves to contain breakthroughs. German tank aces, despite their extraordinary kill ratios, could not alter strategic outcomes. Otto Carius, 150-plus tank kills, survived the war by surrendering to Americans. Kurt Nispel, 168 confirmed kills, possibly as many as 195, was killed in the war's final weeks fighting opponents who outnumbered him hundreds to one. Johannes Bolter, 144 kills, died in 1944 when his Panther was destroyed by multiple Shermans attacking simultaneously. Ernst Barkmann, 82 kills, survived by repeatedly abandoning immobilized or fuel-starved tanks. Their skill was legendary. Their impact on the war's outcome was negligible. The factories won the war, not the aces. In 1947, 3 years after his death, Michael Wittmann's story was analyzed at the U.S. Army Command and General Staff College at Fort Leavenworth. The analysis concluded, individual tactical excellence, as demonstrated by SS-Obersturmbannführer Wittmann, proved insufficient to overcome systemic industrial inferiority. German operational art remained sophisticated, but German strategic capacity collapsed under Allied material superiority. Recommendation: future U.S. Army doctrine must prioritize sustainment of industrial base as prerequisite for military victory. Tactical excellence without strategic resources leads inevitably to defeat. The Americans had learned the lesson the Germans had died teaching. Soviet Marshal Georgy Zhukov, who commanded Soviet forces at Kursk, wrote in his memoirs, "The Germans brought their best tanks, their best crews, their best tactics. We brought more tanks than they could count, more ammunition than they could survive, more men than they could kill. We won not because we were better soldiers, though our soldiers fought with great courage, but because our factories outproduced theirs." Lenin said, "Quantity has a quality all its own." At Kursk, we proved him correct. This assessment captured the essence of industrial warfare. Quality mattered only to the extent that industrial base could sustain it. Without sufficient quantity, quality became a boutique luxury that altered battles but not wars. The Tiger tank, symbol of German tactical superiority, became a symbol of strategic failure. Germany expended enormous resources developing, producing, and maintaining 1,347 Tigers. These Tigers achieved extraordinary kill ratios and dominated numerous tactical engagements. They also consumed resources that could have produced thousands of Panzer IVs, improved Germany's woefully inadequate truck production, or built desperately needed fighters to contest Allied air supremacy. The Tiger was a brilliant tactical weapon and a strategic mistake. In 1944, Albert Speer, Minister of Armaments, calculated that a single Tiger consumed resources equal to 4 Panzer IVs or 8 Sturmgeschütz assault guns. Germany chose one superior tank over 8 adequate ones. The Allies chose 30 adequate tanks over one superior one. The Allies won. On November 15, 1964, 20 years after Michael Wittmann's death, former German and Soviet tank commanders gathered in Moscow for a symposium on armored warfare. Franz Staudager, who survived the war, attended along with several Soviet officers who had fought at Prokhorovka. General Colonel Pavel Rotmistrov, who had commanded the 5th Guards Tank Army, described the Soviet approach: "We knew German tanks were better than ours individually. We knew German crews were better trained. We knew German tactics were superior. We also knew we could build 3 T-34s for every Panther, 5 T-34s for every Tiger. We knew that even if we lost 3 tanks destroying one German tank, we would still win because we could replace our 3 and Germany could not replace their 1. This was not callousness. This was mathematics." Franz Staudager, responding to Rotmistrov, said, "I destroyed 22 of your tanks in one day at Prokhorovka. I was awarded the Knight's Cross. I was called a hero. I felt like a failure because I knew it didn't matter. You had 800 more tanks that day. 2 weeks later, you had replaced all your losses and added more. We never recovered. Every tank we lost was irreplaceable. Every battle was our last reserves being committed. We won the battles and lost the war because we never understood that modern war is not decided by the best tanks, but by the most tanks." The assembled officers, former enemies, sat in silence. Then Rotmistrov stood and embraced Staudager. "You understand now what we understood then," he said. "Industrial capacity is military capacity." The lessons of Prokhorovka and Kursk were taught at military academies for decades afterward. The NATO doctrine of the Cold War emphasized industrial sustainability. The Soviet Union maintained enormous tank production capacity specifically to recreate their World War II advantage. The United States built a defense industrial base designed to outproduce any potential adversary. The German experience, tactical excellence defeated by strategic industrial insufficiency, became a cautionary tale. Military theorists coined the term qualitative-quantitative trade-off to describe the balance between few excellent systems and many adequate systems. The consensus favored quantity within acceptable quality thresholds. Germany's choice of extreme quality at the expense of quantity was universally judged a strategic error. Michael Wittmann's final resting place remained unknown for decades after the war. His Tiger 007 was destroyed so completely that his body was never recovered. In 1983, the remains of 5 bodies, identified through forensic analysis as Wittmann and his crew, were discovered during road construction near Caen. They were buried with military honors in the German military cemetery at La Cannes, Normandy. At the dedication, a British Army tank officer who had fought in Normandy said, "Wittmann was a superb tank commander, possibly the best who ever lived. But he was killed by a Sherman tank, or perhaps an anti-tank gun, or possibly an aircraft. We don't know for certain because there were so many Allied weapons in the area that multiple units could credibly claim his destruction." That uncertainty itself is his memorial. Not to his lack of skill, but to the overwhelming Allied material superiority that made individual German excellence irrelevant. The image that haunts historians studying the Eastern Front is not the tactical brilliance of German panzer operations, but the strategic futility of excellence without resources. The photograph of a Tiger tank, magnificent and deadly, abandoned due to mechanical failure or fuel shortage, surrounded by burned-out T-34s it destroyed before succumbing, that image captures the tragedy of Germany's war. They built masterpieces to fight a production line. They crafted quality to oppose quantity. They confused tactical victories with strategic advantage. And they learned, too late, that in industrial warfare, the side that can produce the most wins, regardless of who builds the best. July 12, 1943. 2 p.m. Michael Wittmann sat on the engine deck of his Tiger, ammunition expended, fuel low, 28 kills achieved in one day. Around him, the steppes of Prokhorovka burned with destroyed tanks, German and Soviet intermingled. The tactical victory was undeniable. His company had destroyed approximately 150 Soviet tanks while losing 3. And yet, on the horizon, more Soviet tanks were visible, advancing in new waves, their numbers undiminished by the morning slaughter. Wittmann understood in that moment what his superiors would take years to accept. Skill was not enough. Excellence was insufficient. Germany had brought its best tanks, best crews, best tactics to Kursk. The Soviets had brought more tanks than Germany could destroy, more ammunition than German crews could survive shooting, more factories than German strategic bombing could eliminate. The mathematics of defeat were rolling across the steppes, and no amount of tactical brilliance could solve an industrial equation already calculated in Moscow and Washington and London. The war was lost. Not in this battle, but in the factories. Not by soldiers, but by production lines. Not through failure of courage, but through shortage of resources. Michael Wittmann, the greatest tank ace in history, had just learned the hardest lesson of modern warfare: individual excellence becomes irrelevant when industrial capacity determines outcomes. He would fight for 13 more months, achieve 110 more kills, earn Germany's highest decorations, and die forgotten in a ditch in France, destroyed by enemies so numerous that no one could even determine which unit killed him. The Tiger had met the assembly line. The assembly line won.